Have you ever turned on the news and thought, how do we get here? How do we get so out of whack? Well, let me introduce you to a man by the name of George William Frederick Hegel and his dialectic. George Hegel was born in 1770 and died in 1831. He was a German philosopher, and one of his greatest and biggest contributions to the world of philosophy was the Hegelian dialectic. And according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on George William Frederick Hegel, his dialectic scheme emphasized the progress of history and ideas. And according to, what is a dialectic? According to Hegel's dialectic on Stanford.edu, it is a term used to describe a method of philosophical argument that involves some sort of contradictory process between two opposing sides. And according to the University of Chicago.edu, Plato, he valued the dialectic, and he thought it was he highly valued the dialectic in ways that we can obtain the truth. Plato's version is more the classical way of looking at a dialectic. He believes that express views that would be challenged by another person. And by doing this, it would lead to a dialogue, and that dialogue would be a back and forth dialogue, and as the dialogue progressed, the conversation progressed, new views would emerge and evolve out of it. Now Hegel disagreed. Where Plato was more about the people in the dialogue, Hegel was more about the subject at hand. Now according to the University of Chicago.edu, he thought the dialectic was a medium of truth rather than a means of obtaining, or rather than a means to uncover its illusion. And according to Hegel's dialectic on Carroll.edu, he thought nothing was real except for the whole or the absolute. How does it work? Hegel's dialectic on Stanford.edu tells us that there's three parts to the Hegelian dialectic. You got the thesis, you got the antithesis, and you got the synthesis. Now the thesis is a single idea, and this single idea is incomplete. And this incompleteness of the idea gives rise to the antithesis. The antithesis is nothing more than the polar opposite view of the thesis. Now, between these two things arises the synthesis. And this overcomes both sides. It solves the conflict of these two, so to say. And it leads to a new truth. And once the new truth has been found, the synthesis then in turn turns into the new thesis, and the process starts all over again. You do this over and over and over until the real truth is found. According to the Boston University website, on Hegel's philosophy and its influence on Marxism, everything is in constant flux. Nothing remains static. Nothing. And this is due to the two opposing sides and their constant conflict. Now, did the Hegelian dialectic influence history? Absolutely it did. It sure did. Karl Marx, the father of Marxism, or communism, the biggest influence, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on Karl Marx, this was his biggest, greatest influence, was the Hegelian dialectic in Hegel's thoughts. He used this method to help turn people for capitalism and turn them away from capitalism in hopes of a new society. Other communist nations helped use this to start communist wars and revolutions as well. And the fascists, they also used it. The fascists used it to help start wars and help change the thought process of the people, just as Karl Marx did. And they did this by the speeches that were given, and the philosophers that wrote, they used this method to help sway the people. Now, is this method used today? We're talking about stuff many, many years ago. It can't be used today, can it? Yeah, it can. Just look at prayer in school, or spankings in school. It wasn't too long ago before both was common practice, but methodically, slowly over time, that has gone away. I'll give you something a little more tangible to touch. You got Republicans versus Democrats, conservatives versus liberals. You got work versus welfare, amnesty versus deportation. these are polar opposite views. And each view, when you have to choose, you compromise your belief to come to a solution or a synthesis. Example, amnesty and deportation. You got some people that just want to kick all the illegals out of the country. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter. But you got some that want to bring in any kind of refugee that wants to come live the American dream. Bring them in, give them all the stuff that we have to offer. So more than likely what's going to happen is we're going to take the people who's already here, law-abiding citizens, grant them citizenship, give them the benefits of being an American, and the other ones do as what we need to. Now this method, the Hegelian method, can be very confusing. However, it can be highly effective. It's a powerful tool. And depending on the agenda, it can be very devastating. Most people, when forced with having to choose between two opposite sides, they're going to meet somewhere in the middle. And, by having to meet somewhere in the middle, it brings the thought process a little closer to the antithesis. When you do this over and over and over, you'll be surprised how far the thought process has come along. Just look at gay rights. It wasn't too long ago before the gay people hid their thoughts and didn't want people to know. And it started off with, started off with equal rights. Then you have hate crimes, same-sex acknowledgement, and then now we have full-fledged gay rights for people. Now in the spirit of the Hegelian dialectic, I'll give you a complete opposite view. Instead of a benefit, it could be a dangerous, slippery slope. Not like Plato with the intellectual debate. This can lead to much confusion. And it's a very tough thing to escape. But with knowledge is power, and if you're presented with it, you can get out of the circle. Hegel was a great man of thought. He not only contributed to the world of philosophy, but he created and changed the world today as we know it. All from the tiny stroke of his pen. So with that said, maybe that old proverb is right. Maybe the pen truly is mightier than the sword.